Poor Economics by Abhijit V. Banerjee and Esther Duflo. Global poverty is a huge problem, with around 13% of the world's population making do on less than $1 a day. However, most people fail to make changes that lead to significant improvement in the lives of poor people because they are busy studying the big economic questions and they ignore the everyday lived experiences of the poor. People living in poverty make complex economic decisions every day that are shaped by economics, society, culture, and education. Understanding all the economic, social, and psychological factors that come into play are essential to bringing about real-world change. Providing access to nutritious foods, reliable education and healthcare, and insurance for poor populations would be a significant step in helping reduce global poverty. Empowering women is also an essential step that must be taken to reduce population growth and decrease poverty. While global poverty is a complex problem, there are both large and small-scale solutions that can be implemented both on a local and global scale that can have a significant impact on the fight to end global poverty. Less than $1 a day. Global poverty is an overwhelming problem that does not have a clear solution. About 13% of the world's population lives on the equivalent of 99 US cents per day, and poverty is the cause of millions of deaths per year. While many individuals and organizations, from politicians and economists to famous actors, have fought to help eradicate poverty, the problem remains far from solved. This is because most people view the problem of global poverty in more general terms, while ignoring the day-to-day real-life experiences of the poor people themselves. Economists focus on big general economic questions, such as the role that outside help should play in economic development in poorer countries. However, no one can agree on the answers to these questions. For example, economists such as Jeffrey Sachs argue that outside aid is essential for developing countries to get rid of poverty, saying that it could be completely eradicated in 20 years if more well-off countries spent $195 billion per year on aid. There is some evidence that foreign aid does help some poorer countries prosper. For example, Rwanda saw significant economic growth after it received substantial foreign aid following the Rwandan genocide. However, a single case does not prove the whole theory, and many others argue that outside aid has negative consequences that can outweigh the possible benefits. Many other people argue that outside intervention is ineffective and, in some cases, even harmful to the economic growth of developing countries, and it is better to leave them alone. Research from over 100 developing nations shows that there is no significant difference in growth between countries that received aid and those that did not, so there is no clear answer to this debate. However, this is large because these big questions are not the correct way to view the problem of global poverty. Instead of looking for answers to the general problem, more progress would be made if people studied the lives of individual people living in poverty. This would help economists better understand which tools and forms of aid are actually effective and which are not. Poor people often struggle to get out of the cycle of poverty. This is because many also make self-destructive decisions, such as refusing life-saving medicine, purchasing non-nutritious foods, or having more children than they can afford to support. One of the most important factors to helping end global poverty is understanding why people make these decisions and guiding them towards making more positive ones instead. Poor individuals make complex economic decisions. Around 13% of the world's population lives on less than $1 per day. However, just because they do not have a lot of money, it does not mean that poor individuals do not have to make many complex economic decisions. Poor people are faced with complex economic decisions every day, and in fact, are often forced to be even more thoughtful and particular in their decisions than most, because they have far fewer financial resources. With less money and worse living conditions, people living in poverty must think long and hard before they make an economic decision or investment, and each decision could have consequences that could potentially have broader, long-lasting effects on their lives. Therefore, each decision has a lot of weight, and each consequence is carefully considered before a decision can be made. However, one of the reasons economists fail to understand the problem of poverty is because they do not take into account what drives poor people to make the decisions they make. For example, many poor people reject help when they are offered it. They often do not take advantage of free, life-saving vaccines, or they might spend the little money they have on frivolous items that provide immediate gratification rather than thinking long-term. However, just because these decisions do not seem immediately rational, that does not mean that poor people make these decisions randomly. It simply means that there are other factors that are influencing these decisions, which economists are not considering. Economic, social, and psychological factors all come into play when people make these decisions. Economists can only come to understand these decisions if they seek to gain an understanding of the conditions that influence poor people's decision-making, and understanding is the first step to providing the correct kind of help that can actually make a difference in their lives. When it comes to food, quality is more important than quantity. Poverty and hunger are incontrovertibly linked. Many economists also believe that hunger is a main cause of poverty because individuals cannot be productive members of society if they are hungry. However, this link is not as strong as many people think. Often the problem is not that individuals do not have access to food or that they do not have enough money to purchase food, but that they are purchasing non-nutritious food. Research from over 18 countries has shown that poor people do not spend all their money on calories, which means that they would have the ability to purchase more food if they were still hungry, but they choose not to. Instead, they choose to spend their money on more expensive, tastier food items, such as coffee, tea, or tobacco, than cheaper, more calorie-dense items. This holds true even if individuals receive food subsidies or additional cash. People are more likely to spend this additional cash on luxuries like entertainment or tea than on food. The problem, then, is not quantity, but the quality of food. Poor people, especially children, have access to food, but it is not necessarily nutritious. This means they often lack the micronutrients that are necessary for good health and productivity. This lack of nutrition harms both children's development and the economic health of developing nations. For example, many poor people lack the nutrients iron and iodine. However, according to a study conducted in Indonesia, men and women who received iron supplements worked more and earned more money than they had previously. This means that the problem of food-related poverty would be better solved if poor people were better educated about the benefits of eating nutritious food, and if governments and NGOs were better able to provide and distribute nutritious food or food supplements. Providing cheap food is not necessarily the answer to poverty. High-quality food that is rich in essential nutrients is essential to helping lift people out of poverty. Healthcare is essential. An illness in the family can have devastating effects on poor people. Just one ill family member can cause the entire household's income to drop dramatically, and the cost of their health care can put a dire strain on the family. Therefore, health is an essential part of staying out of poverty. To help poor nations improve the health of their populations, they require three things. The first essential step is providing a better public health system so poor people can access medical help. While many countries have some kind of public health system, it often doesn't work. The system is often unreliable, with few open and operating medical stations and unmotivated and absentee staff. According to a World Bank study, developing countries had a medical center staff absence rate of 35%. Therefore, poor people will not use public health systems unless their governments work to make the whole system more reliable and effective. Secondly, people often do not seek out healthcare because they are uneducated about health problems. A lack of information can mean that cultural and societal beliefs often take the place of true healthcare solutions. For example, in Udaipur, India, poor people do not consume the cheap solution that cures diarrhea when ingested, because many people believe that medicine can only work if it is injected directly into the bloodstream. If they do not believe the medicine will work, they will not take it. Even in developed Western countries like the U.S., this is a problem. In the United States, some people believe that certain vaccines can lead to autism. There is no medical evidence that indicates this, but regardless, many parents still refuse to vaccinate their children against preventable diseases because of their beliefs. Lastly, many people do not have the right incentives to pursue healthcare. For example, while vaccinations are important, many people do not get vaccinations because they do not see an immediate need to. Often, immediate benefits will incentivize people to complete something that will have a long-term impact on their health. For example, in India, the rate of people who complete their vaccinations increased from 6 to 38% when medical workers began offering a set of plates to individuals who received their vaccinations. By understanding what truly motivates people, organizations will be better equipped to provide incentives that will actually change the decisions people make. All children must be educated. Education is an essential factor in ending poverty. Developing countries must educate their children in order to end the cycle of poverty. However, while providing educational facilities is a start, it is often not enough. It is not enough that children simply attend school, but they must receive adequate education while they are there. While all governments now provide children with access to a public elementary school, public school staff are unfortunately often unmotivated, absent, and unconcerned with the success of their students. A World Bank study conducted in India showed that 50% of Indian public school teachers were not in their classrooms when they were supposed to be teaching. Therefore, many Indian students remain uneducated. Indian students also face the cultural problem of elitist thinking. Elitist thinking is common in developing countries, and it leads many people to focus only on educating the most intelligent and academically successful children while leaving the rest behind. In India, for example, the academic system is very challenging, and the children who thrive in this environment are pushed and nurtured, while the rest of the ordinary children are neglected and barely taught even the most basic skills, such as reading and writing. Parents are often the worst practitioners of this type of thinking. According to polls, many parents in developing nations are more inclined to spend their entire educational budget supporting their most academically promising child's educational needs, while neglecting the education of the rest of their children entirely. However, this is not the best way to effectively fight poverty. It is better for the greatest number of children to receive some type of education than it is for one individual to be highly educated, while others lack even basic elementary education. Women's empowerment is the key to ending population growth. Population growth is strongly correlated with poverty. However, regulating population growth is especially difficult because many poor people are incentivized to have lots of children. Without a strong social safety net, people rely on their children to care for them when they get old or sick. Children also provide financial support for their parents in many cases. Therefore, children become the safety net, and the more children a family has, the more likely they are to have someone to take care of them. For example, in China, over 50% of the elderly population live with their children. To prevent people from having many children, governments need to provide better social protection for poor people. The other important step nations must take to prevent population growth is to empower the women of their country. Women are the ones who consciously decide to have children, and many in developing nations will choose marriage and children over remaining in their family's home. It is not a lack of education that causes women to have more children, but a lack of better alternatives. If women were more empowered and their societal roles were strengthened, they would likely have fewer children. According to interviews, women would actually prefer to have fewer children than men would, and so would likely choose to have fewer children if they were empowered enough to make that choice. For example, in Peru, women who received land from the government and were named in the government's documents were more empowered and also had fewer children. Microcredits are not a long-term solution. Microcredits are a popular tool for helping improve the lives of poor people. However, they are also controversial. Microcredits are small loans that financial institutions make to poor people, which enable them to invest in starting their own business or purchasing tools and equipment that would increase their productivity, such as a wheelbarrow. They are helpful because they provide loans that enable poor people to start businesses in developing countries without having to seek out loan sharks that would only loan them money with extremely high interest rates or turn to banks who would likely deny them the money. Studies have shown that poor families who receive microcredits do in fact use the money to invest in their businesses and improve their economic productivity. However, the benefits are mostly limited to the short term. Most of those businesses do not survive because they are not able to make the larger investments necessary to help their businesses grow. These areas still largely lack institutions where these families can take out the larger loans they need without being subjected to overly high interest rates, so they are not economically viable in the long term. These businesses also tend to fail because there is not a huge demand for them. There are few money-making alternatives, so many poor people will open businesses, but if everyone begins opening a shop and selling groceries, then most of those businesses will eventually close due to lack of demand. The best way to end poverty is not simply by providing access to loans, but by helping poor people secure well-paying and stable jobs that will remain secure in the long run. Insurance can help prevent against poverty. Most people in developed countries have access to insurance. Therefore, if something bad happens, such as they get sick or lose their job, they will have some sort of protection. However, poor people in developing countries often do not have the same access to insurance against risk. In general, poor people have to deal with more insecurity and fear than those in Western countries, and they are more likely to be more greatly impacted by things out of their control, such as price fluctuations or losing a job. Because there is little access to affordable insurance, many poor people develop their own networks within their own neighborhoods. However, this type of neighborly assistance is greatly limited and can only assist with small problems. Significant hardship cannot be reduced by this type of assistance. To help prevent poverty, it is important for governments to step in and provide insurance against risks that could have the potential to devastate poor families. For example, poor crop yields or inclement weather can have a great impact on poor people, and government-incentivized insurance could help protect against the risk of these types of misfortune. However, even when insurance is offered, many poor people do not take advantage of it for many reasons, including they are skeptical of insurance, it costs too much, or they simply don't see the immediate benefit of it and turn it down because they are not thinking of the long-term consequences of not having it. Therefore, it is important for the government to step in and provide incentives so everyone will be covered. For example, many poor people in Ghana signed up for weather insurance once it was subsidized by the government. Getting people on board is the most difficult part. Once poor people realize the benefits of an insurance system, subsidies could most likely be gradually reduced or lifted. Poverty requires both large-scale and small-scale solutions. There is no single solution to global poverty. One solution is implementing major institutional changes. Most economists agree that poverty cannot be ended until the problems of unstable political regimes and corrupt politicians are solved. For example, poverty cannot be solved if corrupt officials steal aid that is meant to go towards alleviating the poverty of their citizens. Therefore, implementing democratic political regimes is one of the most important steps to eliminating poverty. However, local small-scale government changes can also make important contributions to fighting poverty. Local actions can help offset some of the negative effects of large corrupt governments. For example, in 1996, a study showed that the Ugandan government distributed very few of the subsidies they received to the schools that were supposed to be benefiting from the additional funds. When the Ugandan people found out, they demanded reform from the treasury. In 2001, the same study found that real change had occurred, with about 80% of the subsidy money now going to the schools. The public was able to use the information they received to demand reform and enact real change. Therefore, protests on a small, local scale can also lead to significant changes, even if big institutional changes have not yet been successfully implemented. The main takeaway: global poverty is a huge problem with no clear solution. In order to provide real, lasting improvements to the poverty problem, economists need to understand the social, cultural, and psychological, not just economic, reasons behind why poor people make the decisions they do. When economists understand the real, everyday experiences and motivations of poor people, they will be better able to incentivize them to make choices that can lead to lasting change. Finding methods to encourage poor people to educate all their children, take advantage of health care, consume nutritionally dense food, and sign up for insurance are significant steps to helping reduce poverty. To bring about lasting change, women must be empowered. Strong social support systems and steady, stable jobs must be available in developing nations. Big political change, as well as local problem solving, also has to happen in order to eradicate global poverty.
Hi, I'm Rhonda, and this is an exclusive audiobook video recorded for the Audiobook Master Channel. Enjoy your audiobook and have fun learning. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button so you'll get updated on our next upload. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up and say your thoughts about the book we just covered. Do you want to listen to a summary or review of a book that we haven't covered in the past? Say it in the comments below or send us a message. Don't forget to check our other uploads. Enjoy listening!